Now I would actually like to continue in the animation blueprints by adding a new, better animation for sprinting. Currently, we don't have any sprinting animation. So currently, if we just, oh, yeah, actually, since we don't have this, we don't actually prevent any input, we can still move while it's done. So it's purely animation based. So with shift, we can still sprint, but we see enormous foot sliding, and it just looks a bit bad because it doesn't actually animate any faster or do anything different. Well, luckily, this character that actually came from one of Epic Games' canceled games, Paragon, has some really cool animations besides the one we already used. And one of those is called travel mode. Let's see, we have a travel. Let's look at this one, travel mode forward. See here, we can see this animation. And actually, I'm holding down Alt and holding down left click to orbit like this. So we can see this this really cool animation, which I think looks way cooler, way more interesting for a sprint. So that is one that I want to use, and I want to do some cool blending with that. So let's pop back over to the anim graph, and let's see actually in the locomotion and then the idle jogs. Here is actually one where I want to add it in, and I'm going to blend it in a little bit differently. Of course, we could again use one of those states, but now I'm just going to show off a bunch of different ways to do this kind of thing. So in this case here, what we see is a cached pose. So we can't even click on this, but it is a, as the tooltip also describes, it is a reference to the animation tree elsewhere in this blueprint. So we have some kind of cached pose somewhere called ground logo. So if you just go back to the anim graph, you can actually see that being used here. Here it's being saved as a cached pose. And it kind of serves two purposes. Just to briefly explain what this is used for. First of all, it is just to cache your pose, and this will store all the values, and you can use it elsewhere, but you can also use it multiple times. So for example, here we have a cache pose, logo pose, and it's being used again here. So that way you can just reuse results. You just calculate it once and then you let it be used multiple times. And this ground logo, what it really does is has an idle, jog, run, stop, etc. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make our own cached pose. But what it's really about is I want to have some kind of cool blending going on between an idle and a sprinting animation. And what we can do for that is something called blend spaces. And first, let me quickly take a look at one of the existing blend spaces. Let's see. Let me just open it as an asset. I think it should be travel mode, direction BS. This is one of those blend spaces. Now we're going to make our own, and it's going to be a lot simpler than this. But I quickly want to give you an overview of what a blend space is and how it can be used. So here we see this grid with all these points, and all these points are actually animations. So we have travel mode forward. This is the idle, another forward, and here it's actually another idle, backwards. And what this does in this case is it has two of these axes with variables that we can input from code. And this is its speed, and this is the rotation. So minus 180, so it must be moving backwards. But since the speed is 0, it's still going to be idle. That makes sense. And then here, speed of 600, but still a rotation of minus 180, then it must be backwards. So this is kind of like, can be used for kind of complicated blending. And we're going to make this easier, luckily. But what you can do is you can hold down Shift, and this is where you can sort of like preview how this blends. So as we go up towards the 600 units of speed, we can see that it blends from an idle to a move. And then if we go left, we can see that it angles itself and then it angles backwards. So this is really cool, really, really powerful, but it can also take a little bit of time to really get used to on like how to visualize this and how to set this up. But the tools are really cool. So what I like to do is make a simple version of this. So let's close this guy up and actually go into the content browser because I'm going to make a new asset. And under animation, I'm going to make a new blend space. And we have two versions of this. The one that we just saw was called a blend space. And the one we're going to be using is blend space 1D because I just want to deal with only one variable. I only want to have one axis to worry about. We're not going to worry about the rotation, like having backwards, forwards, all of that. I just want to care about the speed. So we have blend space 1D. and then you need to select a skeleton. Well, luckily we have our skeleton named Gideon, just like our animation blueprint. So we can just click that. And then we get something like, it should be sprinting underscore blend space 1D. I think that's a decent name. Okay, so now we have an editor that looks a little bit simpler for now. And it just is in a bit of a T pose or Y pose, I guess. And that way what we need to do is set up some variables here for our horizontal axis. And let's just name this speed. This will just help us understand what this is used for. And then as a maximum value, I'm going to set this again to the 600 because that is a good movement speed for us, which would be full speed. And then the grid divisions, I'm going to make this a 6 as well. So we had more of these places to place these animations. I use 6 because it aligns nicely with a per 100 units. It's not, it doesn't have to be 6. So now what we have is, well, we could hold on shift again to like blend, but we have nothing to blend between. So what I want to have here is just an idle animation. And then on the other side, I want to have this travel mode forward animation that we just saw earlier. So let's search for travel mode here. And first just drag on the idle, and we can now see that it snaps to these grids. So we just drag it in here. So now I can see, okay, it's in idle. And then we have the other one is in forward. See, so now we can see that it blends between, if we hold down shift again, to blend between the idle and the forward. And what I would also like to do, now that we're here anyway, I'm just going to drag on another one of those forward so that after 400 units, we can see like your speed 401, 400. It will already be at full speed. And then if we go further along, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click on this guy. And we can actually set the rate, the playback rate. So I'm going to set, okay, let's make this 1.5 speed so that it just looks like it's moving faster. We don't really have like a lot of motion, but I think it will be enough to see this go a little bit slower and then a little bit faster if it is like moving like sprinting speed. Let's save this guy and go back into our animation blueprint so that we can start using this. So with this new blend space, let's look for sprinting. So now we have our blend space sprinting. And here we can see that variable that we just created. So we can just link that up to our speed that was already available in the animation blueprint. And now what I'm going to do, just to show it off, I'm also going to make one of those cache poses. I was just looking for cache, new save cached pose. And this one I'm going to call floating loco, just to be different from the ground loco or sprinting loco, whatever you want to call it, locomotion. So this will now be, well, will be running as soon as we start using this guy. This will be run and will be saved here so we can use it in other places. Okay, so let's start using it actually. So we go into the locomotion, go back in this idle/jogs. And now here, I'm just going to blend between the two. Again, we could also make another state, but since we already showed up states, I'm going to blend in one of those new logos. So one of those cache poses. So floating loco. So now we have our own little cached pose. And now here, just like we did with the death animation, I'm going to blend by Boolean, blend by bool. Whereas the variable that we're going to blend on is just going to be another one variable that we need to make is sprinting. So let's actually make that new variable. Speed is sprinting. And then if it is true, we do floating. And if it's false, then we go into the regular old ground loco. Okay. And by the way, the reason that I'm doing now this part again in Blueprint is just because we showed the thing in C++. So this one I'm just going to show off in Blueprint again on the event graph, because this guy we have to still again link up to something. So actually not in the event graph, but now in order to link that up, we should open up our event graph. And now we can actually start making use of this action component that we already cached, which is really convenient. So let's just drag that on and look for active gameplay tags, because we have another one of those tags as well that we apply when we're sprinting. In order to show that off, in case you don't quite remember, in our action sprint, we are granting tag, and in this case, we actually call it action.sprinting. We didn't call it status.sprinting. Could have called it status.sprinting, I suppose, but either way, we still have a tag that we can use. and we look for a hashtag, and then we have our sprinting. And with that, we can just assign it here. So now we just make sure that we have linked up our sprinting state, basically. Cool. Okay. Oh, another thing that would be useful to check is if this is actually currently working. So for that, let's go back into that locomotion. Actually, we don't really need to go anywhere. I just want to see if this actually works in our little preview window. So by setting sprinting to true, we should now see him flow. Cool. So now we know at least everything is linked up. It works at least in our preview window. And then let's try and play this, because now what should happen, let me go back to the root. Now what should happen is this speed will be passed into this sprinting blend space. And then that will result us in either an idle, or it will blend to the to this movement animation. Okay, so let's play it and see if we have something. Oh, we still have the stunned animation, so we can get rid of that one. So now when we play, we actually get this really awesome looking floating sprint animation. We can blend it a little bit better though, because what happens now is if we stop immediately, if we stop sprinting immediately back to the walking. But already the sprinting itself looks pretty cool, and we can even go sideways, and it still blends well with that head look that we have. That was already part of the basic animation blueprint itself. So really awesome. Let's improve the blending though. Then that is something we should do in two places. The first one, when it comes to this blend space, is I don't want it to be able to go from, again, holding down shift, for full speed to no speed instantly. This won't look good. So if it changes speed, I want it to be like slowly blending to his new target. And for this, we can just use one of those variables as well, which is called target weight interpolation speed per second. This will be anywhere between maybe 1 and 10 would be usually good values. So I'm going to use something like 4. Now, if we can again preview this, if we just immediately flick it to the right and flick it to the left, you can see that now it is blending a little bit more slowly. The higher the value, the faster it blends. And if it's 0, then it blends instantly. So again, let's just get rid of that in the player character, because we no longer need that. So Alt click. So again, Shift. And now, this is actually one part. Actually, I forgot to even show that. Is if we stop running, we're still in the sprint state, but at least now what we see is that it takes a little bit of time when moving and stopping. We're still in sprint, by the way, because we can still see the legs elevated. So it is still at least doing that a little bit more slowly instead of instantly. But the other part, this one is still way too fast. And so that part we actually should do in another back in our animation blueprint. So let's go to the locomotion again, to the idle/jogs. And now here, by the blending by Boolean, this is what I want to make, what I have blends more slowly. So if we set this something to like 0.3 and 0.3, now it blends between these two poses over 0.3 seconds, both ways. And so we get a more of a smooth transition between running and floating. So let's try this one out again. See, so now this already feels way better, because now we get this running animation that's more slowly, more smoothly blends over into the speed or into the floating animation. All right, cool. So that is kind of like shows some concepts of animation blueprint. There's a whole lot more to cover, and this is certainly not really basic. It's pretty involved already, but I hope at least you get like a sense of what it takes to make good blends and kind of like what's available and how to do all that sort of thing.